I wake up at 6 o'clock every morning, whether I want to or not. It's a habit I developed during my 45 years as a secretary at Baker and Associates, and it hasn't gone away since I retired. I'm lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling where I've been meaning to fix a crack for 4 years now, thinking that today will be no better or worse than yesterday. My name is Nancy Holloway. I am 68 years old, and I live in a house that was once filled with love and respect. It's quiet here now. Henry died 4 years ago of a heart attack, and since then I've grown accustomed to being alone. So much so that sometimes I'm startled when the phone rings. Our house in Albemarle isn't a mansion, but it's spacious, 2 stories, with 3 bedrooms and a small garden where I grow roses. Henry bought it 30 years ago when he got a promotion. "This is our nest, Nancy," he'd say as he walked me through the empty rooms. We furnished it gradually, putting a piece of our souls into each piece. Our son Edmund grew up here. He brought his fiancée Tabitha here, and our grandchildren were born here. I slowly get out of bed, put on my robe, and go down to the kitchen. I make tea, take out the toast. Dishes clink in the silence, reminding me that no one is here but me. It didn't used to be so depressing. For the first year after Henry died, Edmund visited me often, helping with the house, bringing my grandchildren. Then his visits became less frequent, and now he only comes when he has to or when he needs something. Edmund works as an accountant for a large insurance company. He has always been a pragmatic boy. Even as a child, he put all his pocket money in a piggy bank, not spending it on trifles like other children. I was proud of his prudence, but sometimes I wished he were a little more carefree, that he could enjoy the little things like his father. He's 42 now, with his own house in the suburbs, a wife and 2 teenage children, 15-year-old Rory and 13-year-old Yvette. Tabitha doesn't work. She takes care of the house and the children. She's always been a cold woman, and I've never been able to understand what she has in common with my son, other than calculation. Maybe I'm biased, though. I finish my tea and head for the shower. It's Saturday, which means we have family dinner tonight. Once a month, usually on the last Saturday, Edmund and his family come to my house. These dinners used to be a celebration for me, now they are an ordeal. When I go to the market to buy groceries, I take my time. At my age, rushing does not lead to anything good. I put on my beige coat, tie a silk scarf around my neck, a gift from Henry on our 30th wedding anniversary, and walk out into the street. Albemarle is a small, cozy town. I know almost everyone here, especially in our neighborhood. My neighbor, Mrs. Prentice, waves to me from her garden. "Good morning, Nancy. How are your roses?" "Good morning, Elizabeth. They're blooming," I smile back. Mrs. Prentice is the only one of the neighbors who still visits me without reason. She's a widow like me, but unlike me, she has no children. Maybe that's why she values companionship more. At the market, I carefully choose the food for dinner. Edmund likes roast beef. Tabitha prefers fish. The kids only eat pizza and hamburgers. I try to please everyone, even though I know my efforts are unlikely to be appreciated. Coming home with heavy bags, I notice Edmund's car in front of my house. It's strange, they usually arrive in the evening. I quicken my step as fast as my legs and bags will allow. The front door is unlocked. There are voices coming from the living room. I walk in quietly and stop in the hallway, not wanting to make my presence known right away. "This room could be a study," Edmund says, "and this will be a playroom for the children." "What about the second bedroom upstairs?" Tabitha asks. "It's very small. You could combine it with the master bedroom and make a large walk-in closet or bathroom," my son says. There is so much unused space in this house. I stand frozen with surprise and resentment. They are discussing remodeling my house as if I had already died or moved out. This isn't the first time I've heard this kind of talk. They used to at least try to be more secretive, but lately they've been talking about it more and more openly, just not in front of me. "When can we move in?" Tabitha asks. "Our house is getting too small for us." "Soon," Edmund answers with a note of impatience in his voice. "I have to convince my mother that she'll be better off in a nursing home, for her own good." At that moment, I decide to make my presence known. I close the front door loudly and enter the living room with my bags. "Edmund! Tabitha! What a surprise! I wasn't expecting you so early," I say, trying to make my voice sound normal. They flinch and turn to me. Their faces are a mixture of surprise and embarrassment, quickly replaced by fake smiles. Mom, we thought we'd come early to help you get ready, Edmund says, coming over and taking the bags from me. How nice of you, I reply, knowing it's a lie. Where are the children? They're coming over tonight with the neighbors. Rory has soccer practice today, Tabitha says, fixing her perfectly styled hair. I nod and go into the kitchen to put out the groceries. Edmund follows me, setting the bags on the table and stomping awkwardly beside me. Mom, Tabitha and I were thinking, it's hard for you to manage a house this big on your own, isn't it? He starts. I'm getting by, I said, taking the meat out of the bag. You know, there are good places for people your age. With medical care, community entertainment. I stop and look at him. Are you talking about a nursing home, Edmund? It's not just a nursing home, Mom. It's a community for active retirees. He tries to smile, but I can see the calculation in his eyes. There's a pool, a library, hobby groups. And who will pay for this community? I ask him bluntly. Well, we could sell this house, he starts, but I interrupt. And where would the money from the sale go? Edmund hesitates. Partly to pay for you to live there, partly, well, you know, Mom, Tabitha and I need a place to live, and our house is getting a little cramped. I nod silently and continue to sort through the groceries. Edmund stands beside me, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. I need to think about it, I say finally. Now, if you really want to help, fix the faucet in the bathroom. It's been dripping for a week. Edmund nods with visible relief and leaves. I stand alone in the kitchen and sigh deeply. So that's what tonight's dinner will be like. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the house is filled with the smells of roast and apple pie. I set the table in the dining room, which is only used for special occasions. Edmund and Tabitha sit in the living room watching TV without offering to help. The doorbell heralds the arrival of the grandchildren. Rory and Yvette pile into the house, typing something into their phones as they go. Hi, Grandma, Rory says without even looking at me. Yvette just nods and walks past. They both head straight for the refrigerator in the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready, I say after them. Wash your hands and sit down at the table. They ignore my request, pulling sodas and chips out of the fridge. Rory, Yvette, Grandma asked you to sit at the table, Edmund says, entering the kitchen. There's no sternness in his voice, but rather awkwardness. In a minute, Dad, Rory replies, opening the bag of chips. We're not hungry, Yvette adds, rolling her eyes. I look at them and remember how small they were, curious, affectionate, happy to see me. What happened? When did they become so cold and indifferent? Dinner passes in a tense atmosphere. Edmund and Tabitha are exchanging meaningful glances. The kids are staring at their phones, only occasionally breaking away to put something in their mouths. How was school, Rory? I ask, trying to start a conversation. Fine, he said, not looking up. How about you, Yvette? Same as always, Grandma. She sighs with a look of martyrdom. Mom, we talked to the director of Sunny Hills, Edmund says suddenly, putting down his fork. It's that retirement place I was talking about. They have space available and they're willing to show you the grounds next Saturday. I chew slowly on a piece of meat, looking at my son. I haven't decided yet, Edmund. But Mom, it's a great place. You'll love it, I'm sure, he insists. It's not safe to live alone at your age. What if you fall or forget to turn off the gas? In 45 years, I've never forgotten to turn off the gas, I say calmly. And so far, I've managed to do it all by myself. But it's only temporary, Tabitha interjected. People don't get any younger, Nancy. Sooner or later, you're going to need help. When I need help, I'll come to you, I say, looking her in the eye. If, of course, you're willing to help. There is an awkward silence. Edmund clears his throat. Of course we're always willing to help, Mom. That's why we offer Sunny Hills. It's the best solution for everyone. For everyone or for you? I ask bluntly. Grandma, you're being overdramatic, Yvette says suddenly, pulling away from the phone. We just want you to be happy. And so we can move into this house, Rory adds with a chuckle. Dad, you promised me my room would have a view of the garden. Edmund gives his son a warning glance, but it's too late. Tabitha purses her lips. Rory, no one moves anywhere until Grandma decides she's better off in a retirement community, she says tautly. But you said we'd be living here by fall, Rory protests. That we could already pick out furniture for our rooms. I look at them, and something chills inside. They've already decided everything. They're already planning their lives in my house without even asking my consent. I think we should go, Edmund says abruptly, getting up from the table. We have to get up early tomorrow. But we haven't even tasted the pie, I say, though I don't want them to stay. Some other time, Mom, Edmund says, avoiding my gaze. Kids, pack up. They hurriedly say goodbye, not even helping to clear the table. I stand at the door, watching them get into the car. Think about Sunny Hills, Mom, Edmund says, lingering on the doorstep. It's a really nice place. We'll come and pick you up next Saturday so you can have a look. Okay, I'll think about it, I reply, knowing that my thoughts are already moving in a completely different direction. As their car disappears around the corner, I go back into the house and start clearing the table. My hands move mechanically and a plan matures in my head. Do they want my house? Do they think they can decide my fate? Well, I have a surprise for them. I look at Henry's picture on the mantelpiece. What would you do if you were me, dear? I ask quietly. Of course, the picture doesn't answer, but it's as if I can hear my husband's voice. Don't let them push you around, Nancy. You're stronger than they think. I nod my thoughts and pick up the phone. There is one call I have to make, but not today. I need to think things through first. I spent the next few days thinking. Not that I had many options, Edmund had made it clear what he wanted, but I wasn't going to give up without a fight. Henry and I had owned this house, paying the mortgage for 25 years. Every corner held our memories. Wednesday morning, I was watering the roses in the garden when the phone rang. It was Pearl Willis, an old friend of mine with whom we had once worked together at Baker and Associates. Pearl had left the law firm 10 years before me and had become a realtor, selling houses in Albemarle and the surrounding area. Nancy, honey, how are you? It's been a long time, came her energetic voice. Hello, Pearl. I'm as well as I can be, I replied, taking a seat on the garden bench. Don't tell me you're still in mourning for Henry. 4 years have passed, it's time to move on. Pearl was always straightforward, sometimes even harsh, but never angry. I liked her honesty. It's not that, I sighed. Edmund wants to send me to a nursing home. What? Pearl exclaimed. Has that boy lost his mind? He's not a boy anymore, Pearl. He's 42. Anybody under 60 is a boy to me, she snorted. What are you going to do? I paused, wondering if I should share my thoughts with her. Pearl never missed an opportunity to take advantage, but I knew I could count on her. I hadn't decided yet, I said finally. But if I need to sell the house, I'll call you first. Sell the house? She sounded surprised. But isn't that what your son wants? Not exactly, I smiled. He wants me to give him the house and walk off into the sunset. But if the house is sold, you know. Pearl laughed. Oh, Nancy Holloway, you were always the quiet one. But when it came to protecting your interests, you were a lioness. Give me a call if you decide to do it. By the way, the real estate market is booming. Your house in a neighborhood like this could be worth a lot of money. We said goodbye, and I went back to my roses, but my mind was already working in a different direction. Maybe selling the house wasn't such a bad idea. Not the way Edmund was planning. That evening, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. When I looked out of the window, I saw Edmund's car. Strange. He didn't usually come in the middle of the week, especially not without warning. I opened the door before he could even ring the bell. Edmund was standing on the doorstep, tapping his keys nervously against his palm. His face was determined. Hi, Mom, he said, walking past me into the house. We need to talk. Hello, Edmund, I said, closing the door. Is something wrong? He walked into the living room and sat down in the chair that had once been his father's favorite seat. I'd always been a little creeped out by that, as if he was trying to take Henry's place in every way. I signed you up for a tour of Sunny Hills this Saturday, he said without preamble. I didn't agree to it, I objected calmly, sitting down across from him. Mom, it's just a field trip. You'll see it, you'll like it, and then we can talk about moving. And if I don't like it? Edmund sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Look, Mom, let's be realistic. You're 68 years old. You live alone in a huge house that requires constant upkeep. You can't climb the stairs, you can't fix a leaky roof or replace a broken tile in the bathroom. I can hire a handyman, I replied. With what money? Your pension barely pays for food and utilities. You're living on savings that will run out sooner or later. He was right, and that's what pissed me off the most. After Henry's death, the financial cushion had really started to melt away, but I wasn't going to admit it to Edmund. I'm coping, I said firmly. For now, maybe. But what about a year from now? 2 years from now? Edmund shook his head. Mom, I'm worried about you. At Sunny Hills, you'll have medical care, community entertainment, you won't be lonely. And you won't feel guilty for rarely visiting me, I added quietly. His face twitched, but he quickly pulled himself together. It's not fair, Mom. I have a job, a family, commitments. I can't be here every day. I'm not asking you to. I just want you to respect my decision to stay in my own home. Edmund stood up and walked across the room, stopping at the fireplace. He picked up his father's picture and stared at it for a few seconds before putting it back down. Dad's been gone 4 years, he said without turning around. But you're still living in the past. This house. It's too big for you alone. But it's just right for your family, isn't it? I asked bluntly. Edmund turned, a flicker of irritation on his face. Yes, it's perfect for us. We have growing children who need space. Rory's going to college soon and he needs a place to study. Yvette wants to study music, but the walls are too thin in our house. And that's why you've decided I should leave? It's a win-win, Mom. Edmund sat down again and took my hand. You'll get care and companionship, and we'll get more space. Plus, the house will stay in the family. Isn't that what Dad would have wanted? I released my hand and stood up. Henry always said I should keep the house so I could live in it as long as I wanted. And then, yes, it could go to Edmund or the grandchildren. But not like that. Not without kicking me out. Henry would want his wife to be able to live in peace in the house they'd chosen and built together, I said. He wouldn't approve of what you're doing, Edmund. My son stood up too, his face beginning to redden. Don't tell me what Father would or wouldn't have wanted. He would understand that sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the good of the family. For the good of the family or for your convenience? I asked. It's the same thing, Edmund exclaimed. My family is your family too. We care about you. We want you to be well. If you really cared about me, you'd ask what I want, I replied quietly. We know what you want, to cling to the past, to this house, to the memories of Papa. Edmund was almost shouting. But life goes on, Mother. You have to move on. It's not up to you to decide what I need, I said calmly, though I was seething inside. Then who should? You're clearly incapable of making the right decision. Because it doesn't coincide with yours? I crossed my arms over my chest. Because it's illogical. Edmund waved his hands. What's the point of holding on to a house you can't keep? A house that's about to fall apart? A house where you could fall and break your neck and no one would know about it until it was too late? This house is in great condition, I countered. Henry has always looked after it, and I continue to do so. Oh, come on, Mother. Edmund waved his hand dismissively. The roof leaks, the garden is overgrown, the paint is peeling. You don't see it because you don't want to see it. You live in a world of illusion. I felt a lump in my throat. Is he right? Am I not seeing the house falling into disrepair? No, it's not. I tend the garden every day. I keep it clean. I call the handyman when something breaks. The house isn't perfect, but it will last for many years to come. I'm not going to Sunny Hills, I said firmly. Not this Saturday, not any Saturday. Edmund took a deep breath as if trying to calm himself down. All right, let's do it another way. You sell the house to me, at market value. I pay for you to live in Sunny Hills for the rest of your life, and you keep the rest of the money for your allowance. That's fair, isn't it? What if I refuse? Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be, he said, a note of weariness in his voice. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. No, you're trying to find a solution that works for you, I objected. You're not even asking me what I want. Okay, he threw up his hands. What do you want, Mom? I want to stay in my house. That's not possible, Edmund said. You can't stay here. It's dangerous and impractical. Dangerous to whom? To me or to your plans? Edmund clenched his fists. You're unbearable. I'm trying to help you, and you're making this so difficult. Why can't you just say yes? Because this is my home and I don't want to leave it, I said calmly. It's not your home anymore, Edmund shouted, losing control. It's an empty shell full of dusty memories. Papa is gone, and the house should serve the living, not the dead. I recoiled as if he'd hit me. Never had my son spoken to me like that before. Edmund, I began, but he interrupted. No, Mother, that's enough. Stop clinging to the past. Stop pretending things are the same. You're getting old, you can't live alone, and I can't let you risk your health over a sentimental attachment to a pile of bricks and wood. It's not your decision, I said, feeling my voice tremble. Yes, it is. Edmund stepped close to me. I am your son, and I am responsible for you. If you can't make a rational decision, I'll make it for you. You have no right to. I do. I have children to take care of. We don't have room in our house. And here, he circled the room, there's too much room for a lonely old woman. It's illogical and impractical. Is that what I am to you? A lonely old woman? I asked quietly. Edmund looked away, clearly embarrassed by his outburst. You know that's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what you meant, I interrupted. To you, I'm not a mother anymore. I'm not a person with a right to my own opinion and decisions. I'm a problem to be solved, an obstacle to the house you want. That's not true, he tried to object, but I could see in his eyes that I had hit the mark. I'm not going to Sunny Hills, I repeated, and I'm not selling you the house. This is my final decision. Edmund stared at me for a few seconds, his face changing from surprise to anger. You're going to regret this, he said finally. When you fall and break your hip, when you're lying on the floor screaming for help and no one hears you, you'll wish you'd taken me up on my offer. Maybe, I replied, but that would be my choice and my regret. Well, fine. Edmund grabbed his jacket. Stay here, cling to your memories, but don't expect me to visit you every week to make sure you're still alive. You don't visit me every week anyway, I pointed out. Edmund ignored my comment and headed for the door. I'm giving you time to think, a week. Then I'll come back and we'll finish this conversation. And this time, I'm hoping for a more reasonable answer. He was already gripping the doorknob when I said, Edmund, this is my home. I'm not leaving here until I decide it's time. He turned, and there was a fury in his eyes that I had never seen before. Get out of here, Mother, and stop clinging to the past, he shouted. This house is no longer yours. It belongs to the future, not the past. He walked out, slamming the door so hard that the dishes in the sideboard rang. I stood in the living room, stunned by his words. My own son had just told me to get the hell out of the house Henry and I had bought, where we had raised him, where he had taken his first steps, celebrated his birthdays, where he was leaving for his senior prom. Tears came to my eyes, but I didn't let them spill over. No, I'm not going to cry. I would take action. I walked to the phone and dialed the number. Pearl, it's Nancy. Remember when we talked about selling the house? I made up my mind. There was a surprised sigh on the other end of the line. So soon? What happened? It's a long story, I replied. Can you come over tomorrow? We have a lot to discuss. Of course, darling. I'll be at your place at 10 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Pearl, I said. And after a moment's hesitation, I added, one more thing. No one must know about the sale, especially Edmund. Oh, Pearl sounded understanding. That was it. Don't worry, Nancy. Your secret will stay with me. And I have to say, I'm impressed. I didn't know you had that kind of, determination. I didn't know it either, I answered honestly. Not until today. After I hung up, I went back into the living room and sat down in Henry's chair. It was the first time I'd allowed myself to do that in years. Closing my eyes, I could almost feel his presence, his support. I know what you're thinking, darling, I whispered. That I should forgive Edmund, that he was our only son. But sometimes forgiveness doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes a lesson is needed, and I'm going to teach him one. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock. It was almost 8 in the evening, but I felt an extraordinary surge of energy. Tomorrow was a big day, and I had to prepare. Pearl was the best realtor in Albemarle for a reason. She knew how to sell a house quickly and profitably, and I knew how to teach a lesson to a son who'd forgotten to respect his mother. I rose from my chair and went into the kitchen to make tea. A plan began to form in my head, clear, simple, and effective. Edmund wanted the house. Well, I would sell it. but not to him. And by the time he found out, it would be too late. Pearl arrived the next morning at 10 o'clock sharp as promised. She had always been punctual, a trait I appreciated. I met her at the door with a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "Gosh, Nancy, you look determined," Pearl remarked as she entered the house. "What did that rascal do?" I told her about last night's conversation, trying to be objective, though it wasn't easy. Pearl listened, shaking her head at times, and when I got to the part where Edmund told me to get lost, she couldn't stand it. "What a horror! And that's your son! We raise them, give them everything, and they—" She didn't finish the sentence, but I knew exactly what she meant. "I want to sell the house as soon as possible," I said. "And without Edmund finding out about it until the last possible moment." Pearl nodded, pulling a notebook out of her bag. "I see. The market's good right now, especially in your neighborhood. Houses here rarely come up for sale, and the demand is high. But we'll need to do an appraisal, maybe do some minor cosmetic repairs to attract more favorable buyers." "There's no time for repairs," I objected. "Edmund gave me a week to think about it, and then he promised to come back. I want the house to be sold by then, or at least in the process of being sold with the papers signed." "That's ambitious." Pearl tapped her pen thoughtfully on her notebook. "But not impossible. I have several clients who are looking for a house in this very neighborhood. If they agree to a quick deal and don't haggle, we can make it work." We spent the next hour talking details. Pearl toured the house, taking notes and pictures for the listing. I quoted the price I was hoping for and was pleasantly surprised when Pearl said we could ask even more. "The house is in great condition, Nancy. I can see that you and Henry have taken good care of it. Yeah, there are some minor flaws, but nothing critical. The large lot, nice neighborhood, proximity to schools and parks all add to the value." When we were done, Pearl promised to contact potential buyers and arrange viewings in the next few days. "In the meantime," she said, "I'd suggest you start sorting things out. Decide what you'll take with you and what you'll keep or sell with the house." That was good advice. After Pearl left, I went up to the second floor and went into the bedroom. Where to start? 30 years of living in this house had accumulated so much stuffed clothes, books, souvenirs from my travels, photo albums, furniture, dishes. It's impossible to take everything. I pulled several large boxes out of the closet that we kept for Christmas decorations and started with the most important things: documents and photos. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, insurance papers, Henry's will, house deeds, tax returns, all of which I neatly stacked in a separate folder. Then I moved on to the photo albums. There were a lot of them, our whole life in snapshots. I spent hours flipping through the pages, remembering every moment. There was our wedding, me in a simple white dress, Henry in a rented suit. We were so young and hopeful. Here is Edmund's birth, a tiny bundle in my arms, and I look at him with the adoration that only a young mother can feel for her firstborn. The first day of school, graduation, going to college, my wedding to Tabitha, the birth of Rory and Yvette. Looking at those pictures, I couldn't believe that the same boy I loved so much was now telling me to get lost. Where had I made a mistake? When did he change? Or had he always been this way and I just didn't want to see it? I put the albums aside. I would definitely take them with me, every single one of them. The next few days passed in a flurry. Pearl brought the first potential buyers the very next day, a young couple with a small child. They walked around the house marveling at the space and light, but ultimately decided they wanted a smaller, cheaper house. The second was a family of 4, husband, wife, and 2 teenage children, almost like Edmund's. They were more interested, asking lots of questions about the neighborhood, the neighbors, the schools. But in the end, they too declined. The woman didn't like the layout of the kitchen. "Don't feel bad," Pearl said after they left. "It's common. First-time buyers rarely say yes right away. Tomorrow, a few more people will come in." And indeed, the next day, a middle-aged couple whose children were grown and gone came in. They were looking for a house in our neighborhood, closer to the city center, but spacious enough for the arrival of children and future grandchildren. "Perfect buyers," Pearl whispered to me as they looked at the garden. They had sold their large house in the suburbs and were now looking for something more compact but still comfortable. Robert and Judith Pearson, that was their name, were a pleasant couple. He a recently retired engineer, she a school teacher. They were excited to see the house, discussing where they would put their furniture. what rooms they would set aside for guests, and how they would arrange the garden. "We like your house, Mrs. Holloway," Robert said before leaving. "We'd like to make an offer." I looked at Pearl and she nodded. "Great. Let's discuss the details tomorrow in my office. I'll prepare all the necessary paperwork." After they left, Pearl hugged me. "That's great news, Nancy. The Pearsons are serious buyers, and they have the cash from the sale of their previous home. We can close the deal in a few days if everything goes smoothly." I was relieved, but also sad. Despite my determination to sell the house to spite Edmund, I couldn't help but feel regret. So many memories, so many years. "Pearl," I said suddenly, "do you know where I could get an apartment? Not here in Albemarle, but somewhere. Far away. I know a realtor in Bridlewood, about 100 miles from here. It's a small coastal town, very quiet and peaceful. I can get in touch with him if you'd like." "Yes, please," I nodded. "I need something small but cozy. And preferably with an ocean view, if possible." "I'll call him tonight," Pearl promised. Now we had to get ready for our meeting with the Pearsons tomorrow. If they offer a good price, we can start the paperwork the next day. And so it was. Robert and Judith offered even more than I expected, as they really liked the house and wanted to avoid competing with other potential buyers. We signed a preliminary agreement, and I received a deposit, 10% of the house price. "Now we have to prepare all the documents for the final sale," Pearl said. "That will take a few days. In the meantime, I've arranged with Michael, my colleague from Bridlewood. He'll show you some apartments this Friday if you can make it." I nodded. It was 4 days before Edmund returned. I had to act fast. Friday morning, I took the bus to Bridlewood. It took about 3 hours, and the whole time I stared out the window, watching the scenery change from suburbia to countryside to seaside. Bridlewood was exactly as Pearl had described it. A small, cozy town with white houses perched on hills overlooking the ocean. The main street was full of little stores, cafes, and restaurants. Even on a weekday, it was lively but not noisy. Michael met me at the bus station, a tall man with graying hair and a friendly smile. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm Michael Jenkins, a friend of Pearl's. Welcome to Bridlewood. How was your trip?" "It was fine, thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "It's a beautiful town." "Oh, it's just the beginning," he smiled. "Wait till you see the coast. We have some of the most beautiful sunsets in the state." Michael showed me 3 apartments. The first was too small, the second was too far from the center, and the third was perfect. A small but bright apartment on the second floor of an old building with a balcony overlooking the ocean. 2 bedrooms, a living room connected to the kitchen, a bathroom. Old wooden floor, white walls, large windows. "This is what I was looking for," I said, standing on the balcony and looking out at the endless blue of the ocean. "I thought so," Michael nodded. "Pearl said you wanted something special. This apartment belongs to an old friend of mine who lives in Europe now. He's renting it out with an option to buy it if you like living here." We discussed the terms of the lease, and I signed a 6-month lease with an option to renew. The rent was reasonable, especially considering the view. Michael promised that the apartment would be ready for occupancy early the following week. As I drove back to Albemarle, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: the joy of finding a new home, the sadness of parting with the old one, the satisfaction that the plan was coming to fruition, and the anxiety of the inevitable confrontation with Edmund. The next day, Pearl and I met with the notary to prepare the paperwork for the sale of the house. Everything went smoothly, and we scheduled the final signing for Tuesday, the day before Edmund was due back. "You should open a new bank account," Pearl advised. "Preferably at a different bank from the one you have now. And don't tell Edmund about the new account." I followed her advice and went to First National Bank in the neighboring town of Riverdale on Monday morning. There I opened a new account in my name, explaining to the manager that I was planning a move and wanted access to my funds in my new location. "When we close the deal tomorrow, the money will be transferred to this account," Pearl said when I returned. "Now let's continue sorting through your things. What did you decide to take with you?" Over the past week, I've gone through almost everything I've accumulated in the 30 years I've lived in this house. Some things I decided to sell with the house. Most of the furniture, kitchen utensils, garden tools. The Pearsons didn't mind. They even liked the fact that they wouldn't have to buy everything they needed at once. I decided to take only the essentials and valuables: Clothes, personal items, jewelry, photo albums, a few books, a painting Henry had bought for our 15th anniversary, his collection of antique clocks, and a box of letters we'd written to each other during his business trips. "I've ordered a truck for Wednesday morning," Pearl said. "They'll load your things and take them to Bridalwood. You can go with them or separately, whichever you prefer." "I'll take the bus," I said. "I don't want to risk running into Edmund if he gets here early." Pearl nodded. "Reasonable. I'll be here when the movers arrive, and I'll make sure they pack and load everything properly." At 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, we met the Pearsons and their lawyer at the notary's office. The signing process took about an hour. Lots of documents, each in multiple copies. Finally, the notary put the last seal on and shook my hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Holloway. The transaction is complete. The house was officially sold to Mr. and Mrs. Pearson." I felt a strange relief mixed with sadness. 30 years of life, 30 years of memories, and now it was over with the stroke of a pen. "When do you plan to move in?" I asked the Pearsons. "We'd like to start moving in at the end of this week, if that's okay with you," Robert replied. "Of course, we understand that you need time to pack your things." "That's all right," I smiled. "I'm almost done. Tomorrow the movers will come and get my things, and the house will be all yours." Judith took my hand. "Thank you for trusting us with your home, Mrs. Holloway. We will take care of it as you have all these years." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Somehow her words touched me more than I expected. After the formalities were over, Pearl and I went to a small cafe not far from her office. "How are you feeling?" she asked me when they brought us coffee. "Strange," I admitted. It was like part of me was still in that house, and another part of me was looking forward. I didn't think it would be so emotional. Pearl nodded understandingly. "It's normal. A house isn't just walls and a roof, it's where your life happened. But you know what? A new life can be just as interesting, especially when you have the means to enjoy it." She was right. The amount I got for the house was substantial. After paying Pearl's commission and all the taxes, I had enough left over to live comfortably for many years, even if I decided to buy a condo in Bridalwood after the lease was up. "What are you going to do after you move?" Pearl asked. I wondered. I'd been so focused on selling the house and organizing the move the last few days that I hadn't really thought about what I was going to do afterward. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe find a hobby or a part-time job. I learned a lot of things at the law firm that could come in handy." "There are several small law offices in Bridalwood," Pearl nodded. "I'm sure they'd love an experienced part-time secretary. And there's a great book club there, too. I know you like to read." We talked for another hour or so, discussing my future life at Bridalwood. As we were saying goodbye, Pearl hugged me. "I'll miss you, Nancy. Promise me you'll call." "I promise," I smiled. "And thank you for everything." Back home, not my home anymore, but still familiar and familiar. I spent the evening finishing packing. The movers were due early tomorrow morning, and I wanted everything ready. Before I went to bed, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of my life with Henry. In the bedroom, I stopped at the picture of my husband on the bedside table. "I hope you approve of my decision, darling," I whispered. "I know you wanted the house to stay in the family, but our son, he's changed. He's no longer the boy we raised." I went to bed knowing that this was my last night in this house. Strangely, I felt no sadness, only a quiet determination. Tomorrow would start a new chapter of my life, and I was ready for it. In the morning at 8 o'clock sharp, the movers arrived. Pearl arrived with them to oversee the process. By 11 o'clock, all my things were neatly packed and loaded into a small truck. All that was left was to write a note for Edmund and leave the keys. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. What to say to the son who wanted to kick me out of my own home? The words wouldn't come. "Write from the heart," Pearl suggested, seeing my predicament. "Tell him everything you feel." So I did. It was a short note, only a few paragraphs, but I put all the pain and disappointment I felt into it. I didn't soften the blow Edmund had to realize that his words and actions had consequences. When I finished, I sealed the note in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen table with the house keys. Then I hugged Pearl one last time, promising to call as soon as I was settled in, and got into a cab to the bus station. When the bus pulled away, I didn't look back. 30 years of my life were left in Albemarle, but ahead was Bridalwood and a new beginning. I didn't know what awaited me there, but I was sure of one thing. It would be my life, by my rules, and no one, not even my own son, could tell me how to live it. Bridalwood greeted me with a sunny day and the sound of the surf. I stepped off the bus and took a deep breath of the salty sea air. Here, 100 miles from Albemarle, my new life was beginning. Michael was waiting for me at the bus station as promised. "Welcome to your new home, Mrs. Holloway," he smiled, taking my bag. "The truck with your things will be here in a couple of hours. In the meantime, I'll take you to your apartment and hand you the keys." My new apartment looked even better than I'd remembered, with sunlight pouring in through the large windows in the living room and a breathtaking view of the ocean from the balcony. Michael showed me how all the appliances worked, where the meters were, and handed me 2 sets of keys. "If you have any problems, call me anytime," he said. "I only live a few blocks away." When he left, I was alone in the empty apartment. It was a strange feeling, starting from scratch at 68. Most people my age dream of stability, of spending the rest of their days in familiar surroundings, among loved ones. And here I was, in an unfamiliar city, with a few boxes of things and memories of a house that no longer belonged to me. But I didn't regret my decision. Every time I remembered Edmund's words, "Get out of here," I was convinced I'd done the right thing. He thought I was weak, dependent, incapable of making decisions. He thought he could control my life. Well, I proved him wrong. The movers arrived around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They quickly and carefully brought in my boxes and a few pieces of furniture that I had decided to take with me: an antique rocking chair, a small desk, a bedside table. The rest I planned to buy gradually, furnishing the apartment to my liking. By evening, I had unpacked the essentials: bed linens, towels, dishes, a few sets of clothes. The rest could wait. I felt tired but also strangely excited, as if reborn. Sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea and watching the sun sink into the ocean, I thought about what was happening now in Albemarle. Edmund was supposed to arrive tomorrow, expecting to find me resigned and ready to move to Sunny Hills. Instead, he would find an empty house and a note. My note. I thought about what to write for a long time. I wanted to vent all the pain and frustration, but at the same time maintain my dignity. In the end, I settled on the following. "Edmund, when you told me to get lost, I decided to take your advice. Only not in the way you planned. I sold the house. Not to you, but to a couple who, unlike you, appreciate it and promised to take care of it. They're moving in next week. I kept all the money from the sale. It's my house, or rather it was my house, and I have every right to dispose of it as I see fit. I'm starting a new life away from Albemarle and away from you. You wanted to be master of this house? Well, now you can buy it yourself if you can, or find another house. Either way, it's no longer my concern. I've been wondering where I went wrong in your upbringing. When did you go from a loving son to a man who tells his mother to get lost? Maybe your father and I spoiled you too much? Or maybe we were too strict. I don't know. But what I do know is that you're not the man I hoped you'd turn out to be. Don't try to find me. I don't want to see you or your family again. Perhaps someday I can forgive you, but right now I need time and distance." Mom! Rereading those words in my mind, I felt no regret or guilt, only the quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. Edmund had to realize that his actions had consequences. Tomorrow at this time, he would read the note. What would his reaction be? Anger, shock, regret, probably all of the above. But that's not my problem anymore. I finished my tea and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first day of my new life. Meanwhile, in Albemarle, 100 miles away, Edmund Holloway was finishing his day's work. He was sitting in his office, going over the last of his reports before he went home. On his desk was a Sunny Hills brochure. He planned to show it to his mother tomorrow to finally convince her of the benefits of moving. In his imagination, everything was already set. His mom would move into a nursing home. He and Tabitha and the kids would move into her house, make repairs, set everything up to their liking. Perfect plan. He'd even started figuring out a budget for the renovations, expecting to use some of the money from the sale of their current home. Edmund felt no remorse for his behavior the week before. Yes, he had been harsh with his mother, perhaps even rude, but sometimes you need harshness to get an important point across. Mom was too sentimental, too attached to the past. She needed a push to move on, and he gave her that push. He was sure that during this week she had realized the inevitability of the move and had come to terms with it. After all, she had no choice. The house required constant upkeep. Her pension was barely enough for basic needs, and he wasn't about to spend his money to maintain a huge house with only one person living in it. It was unsustainable. Finished with his reports, Edmund gathered his things and left the office. Tomorrow he would go to his mother's house right after work. They would calmly discuss the details of the move, perhaps even drive down to Sunny Hills for a preliminary introduction. Everything will be fine. Mom would realize he was doing it for her own good. The next day passed for Edmund as usual. Morning meetings, processing financial documents, lunch with colleagues, a few more hours of work. At 4 o'clock, he gathered his things and headed for the exit. "Leaving early, Mr. Holloway?" the secretary asked. "Yes, I need to visit my mom," he replied. "We have an important conversation. Give her my regards," the secretary smiled. "She's such a nice woman." Edmund nodded and left the office. He rarely talked about his mother at work, but she had dropped by his office a couple of times, and everyone had been charmed by her gentleness and intelligence. No one, of course, knew about his plans to send her to a nursing home. It was a family affair. On the way to his mother's house, Edmund stopped at a flower store and bought a bouquet of her favorite lilies, a small gesture of goodwill to soften the upcoming conversation. As he parked in front of the familiar house, he noticed that something had changed in the yard. The rose bushes his mother had so carefully cultivated had been neatly trimmed, and the driveway to the house had been recently swept. Maybe she'd hired a gardener. That would be odd, given her financial situation. Edmund went to the door and rang the bell. No one answered. He rang the bell again, waited, and without waiting for an answer, pulled out his key. The door opened easily and he entered the house. "Mom," he called out as he walked into the hallway. "Are you home?" There was silence. Only the ticking of the old clock on the wall broke the stillness of the house. Edmund walked into the living room and froze. The room looked different. Many things were missing. The photographs on the mantelpiece, his mother's favorite blanket on the sofa, the collection of porcelain figurines he and his father had collected over the years. "Mom?" he called again, feeling his anxiety rising. He walked quickly around the first floor, the kitchen, the dining room, the small study. Everywhere it was the same. No personal belongings, empty shelves, clean surfaces. It was as if the house were being prepared for sale. Edmund froze, struck by a sudden realization. No, it was impossible. Mother couldn't. She wouldn't dare. He ran up the stairs to the second floor and peered into his mother's bedroom. It was empty. Closet open, no belongings. The bedside table where his father's picture always stood was empty. In the bathroom there was no toothbrush, no towels, no mom's creams and lotions. There was not a single box of old things in the guest bedroom, which she used as a storage room. Edmund felt a chill run down his spine. What was going on? Where had Mom gone? Where had all her things gone? He walked back down to the first floor and into the kitchen, and then he saw it, a white envelope on the table next to the house keys, an envelope with his name written in his mother's neat handwriting. Edmund opened the envelope with trembling hands and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. As he ran his eyes over the first lines, he felt the ground go from under his feet. "I've sold the house, not to you, but to a married couple." "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He read on, and with each line his face grew paler and paler. When he reached the end, the letter fell out of his hands. "She couldn't have done it," he said aloud, as if trying to convince himself. It was some kind of joke. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't a joke. The empty house, the lack of belongings, the formal tone of the note all told him that Mom had indeed sold the house and left, and she had no intention of coming back. Edmund sank back into his chair, feeling panic rising inside. What would he tell Tabitha? What would he tell the children? They had already planned out who would take what room, what renovations they would make. Rory had already chosen the wallpaper for his new room, and Yvette had insisted on converting the small bedroom into a dressing room. And now they had no mom's house, no money from selling it, nothing. She had no right, Edmund muttered, feeling anger replace shock. This is our family home. Father wanted it to stay in the family. But deep down, he knew that Mother had every right to use the house as she saw fit. The house was registered to her. She had paid the mortgage with Dad. She had taken care of it all these years. And now the house belonged to strangers. A married couple, as Mom wrote, people who weren't even related to their family. Edmund jumped up from his chair and began to pace the kitchen. Something had to be done. We need to find Mom, convince her to cancel the deal. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe the papers hadn't been signed yet? He pulled out his cell phone and dialed Mom's number. Ringing, and then the answering machine. You've reached Nancy Holloway. Leave a message after the beep. Mom, it's Edmund, he began, trying to speak calmly. I just read your note. Please call me back. We need to talk. It's very important. He hung up and immediately called back. It went to voicemail again. He left another message, less quiet. After the fifth attempt, Edmund gave up. Mom was clearly not going to take his calls. Maybe she'd changed her number, or just ignoring him. He sank back into the chair and reread the note. I'm starting a new life away from Albemarle and you. Where could she be? She had no close friends, except maybe that woman Pearl with whom she sometimes socialized. Pearl. Of course. She must know where Mama is. Maybe she was even helping her with the sale of the house. Edmund quickly found Pearl Willis's contact on his phone. Mom had written it down in case of an emergency. Well, that was exactly the situation right now. Hello? A woman's voice answered the phone. Pearl? This is Edmund Holloway, Nancy's son. I need to speak to you. Ah, Edmund, her voice was cold. I've been expecting your call. Do you know where my mother is? He asked bluntly. Yes, I do, Pearl replied calmly. But I won't tell you. She doesn't want you to know. You don't understand. Edmund tried to remain calm. There's been a misunderstanding. I need to speak to her. A misunderstanding? Pearl sounded sarcastic. You call it a misunderstanding that you told your own mother to get the hell out of her house? Edmund fell silent. So his mother had told Pearl about their quarrel. It was a moment of anger, he said at last. That's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what you meant, Pearl cut him off. You wanted to get rid of your mother so you could have her house. But she was smarter than you thought. I wanted her to move to a place where she would be safer and more comfortable, Edmund countered. I was worried about her. You were worried about her house, Pearl corrected him. And now it's sold. Legally, with all the formalities. The new owners will move in next week. Edmund felt his last hope fading. You helped her sell the house. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I'm a realtor, that's my job, Pearl replied. And I must say, your mother got a very good price. A house in this neighborhood, in this condition, is rare on the market. How much? Edmund couldn't take it anymore. How much did she get for the house? Pearl grinned. That's confidential. But enough to ensure a comfortable life for many years to come. And it's all thanks to you, Edmund. If you hadn't tried to kick her out of the house, she would never have taken that step. Edmund was silent, digesting the information. Mom had sold the house, taken the money, and disappeared. All because of something he'd said in a fit of irritation. Tell her I want to talk to her, he said at last. It's important. I will, Pearl replied, but don't expect a reply. Your mother is very determined to start a new life without you. She can't just disappear, Edmund exclaimed. I am her son. The son who told her to go away, Pearl reminded him. She took your advice. Show respect for her decision. With those words, she hung up, leaving Edmund in the deafening silence of the empty house. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, phone in hand, unsure of what to do next. His entire carefully constructed future had crumbled overnight. The house he'd counted on was gone. The money that could go to pay for Mom's stay in Sunny Hills, with a decent balance for his family, as he'd planned, was gone too. And there was no Mom. Edmund sank slowly into his chair, feeling panic rising inside. What would he tell Tabitha? What would he tell the children? How would he explain to them that they wouldn't have the house they dreamed of? He picked up the note again and reread the last lines. Don't try to find me. I don't want to see you or your family again. Perhaps someday I can forgive you, but right now I need time and distance. Did she really mean it? Had she really severed all ties with him, with her grandchildren? You're not the man I'd hoped to raise. Those words stung the most. Mom had always been proud of him, always supported his decisions. And now? Edmund folded the note and tucked it into his pocket. He had to go home and somehow explain to Tabitha what had happened. She wouldn't be happy to hear the news. As he left the house, he looked back one last time at the place where he'd grown up, where he'd spent so many happy moments. The house he thought would one day be his. Now that house belonged to strangers and his mother had started a new life without him. All because of a few words spoken in anger. Get out of here, Mom. Who would have thought she would take them so literally? And so decisively? Edmund closed the door and put the keys in the mailbox as the note had instructed. Then he got into his car and drove home, rehearsing the conversation with Tabitha in his head. It was not going to be an easy evening. 6 months had flown by. Bridalwood turned out to be exactly the place I'd been looking for. A small, quiet town on the coast where everyone knew each other, but respected personal space. No one looked at me as a lonely old woman who had to give way to the young. On the contrary, many Bridalwood residents were about my age, retirees who had chosen this quiet place for a quiet life by the ocean. My rented apartment became a home. I furnished it to my liking: light curtains, comfortable furniture, bookshelves filled with my favorite novels and biographies. On the walls are a few paintings I bought at a local art fair. Nothing fancy or expensive, just cozy and homey. Every morning I woke up at sunrise, made myself breakfast, and went out on the balcony to admire the ocean. Then a walk along the shore when the beach was still empty, and only seagulls kept me company. Occasionally I would meet other early birds: Martha, the owner of a local bakery, walking her corgi; Howard, a retired literature professor who swam every morning regardless of the weather; Elizabeth, an artist who came to the beach with an easel to capture the sunrise. Gradually, these chance encounters developed into friendships. Martha invited me to a meeting of a local book club that met once a week in the back room of her bakery. Howard suggested I join a group of classical music lovers who put on house concerts. Elizabeth talked me into trying my hand at painting, and to my surprise, I discovered that I had a definite talent for watercolor. At the end of my 6-month lease, Michael, my realtor, offered to buy my apartment. The owner is planning to sell, he said, and he's willing to give you first right of first refusal, given that you've been a model tenant. I wondered. The money from the sale of the house in Albemarle was still in the account, almost untouched. I lived modestly, allowing myself only the necessary expenses and small pleasures: dinners at local restaurants, books, tickets to concerts in the city park. Buying an apartment would mean that I was finally settled in Bridalwood, that I was really starting a new life. I'll think about it, I said to Michael. When I got home, I sat on the balcony and stared out at the ocean for a long time. The waves were crashing on the shore, receding, and coming back again, an eternal, unchanging rhythm. There was a wisdom in that, not clinging to the past, not afraid of change, moving forward. The next day, I called Michael and told him I wanted to buy an apartment. The paperwork took a few weeks, but at the end of April, I became the full owner of my new home. It was a strange feeling to own real estate again, to put down roots again. But this time it was different. It was my choice, my decision, my home. In honor of the housewarming, I threw a small party for my new friends. Martha brought freshly baked bread and cakes. Howard brought a bottle of good wine. Elizabeth brought a small watercolor of my house. We sat on the balcony, watched the sunset, talked about books, music, art, and shared stories from our lives. You never talk about your family, Nancy, Martha remarked when the conversation turned to children and grandchildren. I hesitated, not knowing what to say. Over the months, I had deliberately avoided talking about the past, about Albemarle, about Edmund and his family. We're not very close, I said at last. I have a son, a daughter-in-law, 2 grandchildren, but we haven't spoken in a long time. That's sad, Martha sighed. Family is so important, especially at our age. Not always, Howard argued. Sometimes family ties bring more pain than joy. Sometimes it's better to have a family of your own family of friends, of people who really appreciate you. I smiled gratefully at him. Howard understood. He, too, had a complicated relationship with his children. His son and daughter lived in different states and rarely visited their father. To a new family, Elizabeth offered, raising her glass. To a new family, we said in unison. That night, after the guests left, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I thought about Edmund, about Tabitha, about Rory and Yvette. I wondered how they'd lived for those 6 months. Had Edmund managed to buy a new house? Was he still angry with me for what I'd done? I felt no remorse. Edmund got what he deserved. But sometimes I felt sad, especially when I thought of my grandchildren. They were still children, despite their adolescence and ostentatious coldness. They were just repeating their parents' behavior. Maybe someday, when they grew up, they would understand. I woke up this morning with a firm decision. Stop thinking about the past. I have a new life, new friends, new hobbies. I have to move forward. And I really started to move forward. Every day I became more and more immersed in the life of Bridalwood. I joined a volunteer program at the local library where I read books to children twice a week. I signed up for a watercolor painting class taught by Elizabeth at her studio. I even started working at Martha's Bakery just a few hours a day, not for money, but for companionship and to feel useful. In June, when the weather got really warm, Howard suggested I join a group of retirees planning a trip to Europe. 2 weeks, Italy and France, he said. A small group, just 8 people. No tedious excursions, just what we were interested in: museums, concerts, local cuisine. I hesitated. I'd never been abroad in my entire life. Henry and I had always set aside money for Edmund's education, for home repairs, for unexpected expenses. Traveling to Europe seemed like something out of the realm of fantasy. I don't know, Howard, I said. I've never flown across the ocean before. All the more reason to try it, he smiled. At our age, you have to seize every opportunity. Who knows how many we have left? He was right. The money from the sale of the house was in the account, and I could afford the trip. Why not take the chance to see the world? Okay, I nodded. I'll go. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity passport applications, ticket purchases, hotel choices, itineraries. I bought a new suitcase, comfortable shoes for long walks, guidebooks for Rome, Florence, Venice, and Paris. Each day, I became more and more fired up about the upcoming trip. The trip exceeded all my expectations. Italy, with its ancient ruins, majestic cathedrals, cozy squares, and incredible food. France, with its elegant Paris, picturesque countryside, and exquisite wines. I greedily absorbed new impressions, photographed everything, tasted dishes that I had only read about before, and talked to the locals in a mixture of English and sign language. Howard turned out to be the perfect companion, attentive, educated, with a good sense of humor. He knew the history of every place we visited, could talk for hours about artists whose works we saw in museums, about composers whose music we listened to at concerts. One evening, sitting in a small restaurant in Venice overlooking the Grand Canal, I caught myself thinking that for the first time in many years I felt truly happy. Not just content or calm, but happy, with that light, airy feeling inside, with a smile that never leaves my face, with the wish that this moment would last forever. Here's to a life that's just beginning, Howard said, raising his wine glass. Here's to life just beginning, I repeated, clinking glasses with his. Back in Bridalwood, I found myself looking at my town with new eyes. After majestic Rome and elegant Paris, it seemed small and provincial, but at the same time cozy and familiar. It was my home, a place I had chosen for myself, a place where I was accepted as I was. Life fell into a nice rhythm: morning walks on the beach, work at the library and bakery, evenings with the book club or friends. I started planning new trips, maybe Spain next spring, or Greece. The world was suddenly so big and accessible. In the fall, when the tourist season was over and Bridalwood was quiet and almost deserted again, I decided to take swimming lessons. All my life, I'd been afraid of deep water, but now, living by the ocean, it seemed counterintuitive. The instructor, a young guy named Jason, was patient and attentive. He didn't rush me, let me get used to the water gradually, and praised me for every little success. By the end of October, I could swim a short distance along the shore, and it filled me with pride, like a child learning to ride a bike. "You're making amazing progress, Mrs. Holloway," Jason said after one of the classes. "Most people your age wouldn't even dare to try, probably because most people my age are afraid of change," I replied. And I realized that it's never too late to start something new. He smiled. "That's a great approach to life. My grandfather is the same way. He learned to play the saxophone at 75 and now he's in a jazz band. The idea of being able to start playing in a jazz band at 75 amused me and inspired me at the same time. Really, why not? Who says that at an advanced age you should only sit in a rocking chair and knit socks?" In November, when the weather turned cool for swimming, I decided to try another new hobby: cooking classes. Martha organized them in her bakery once a week in the evenings when the main crowd was over. "Nothing complicated," she assured me. "Just a few simple but tasty dishes that anyone can make at home." It turned out to be fun to cook with friends. We learned how to make pasta from scratch, bake bread, make complex sauces, and create gourmet desserts. After each class, we sat around a large table in the back room of the bakery and enjoyed tasting the results of our labors, drinking wine and discussing plans for the next class. One such evening, when I returned home smelling of vanilla and cinnamon after my Christmas cookie class, I found a letter in my mailbox. A regular paper letter, which in itself was a rarity in the age of email and messengers. I pulled out the envelope and looked at the return address. My heart skipped a beat. Albemarle. The handwriting was unfamiliar to me, but the postmark left no doubt. The letter was from my old town. When I entered the apartment, I put the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time, hesitating to open it. Who could have written to me? Edmund? But how did he know my address? Perhaps Pearl. But we talked regularly by telephone, so why would she write a letter? Finally, pulling myself together, I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of paper written in neat feminine handwriting. "Dear Nancy, you are probably surprised to receive this letter. I've been hesitant to write for a long time, but I thought you had a right to know what's going on. This is Tabitha, Edmund's wife. I got your address from Pearl. She didn't want to say, but I convinced her it was important. I hope you won't be angry with her. Edmund still hasn't come to terms with what you've done. He thinks you cheated him out of what should have been his. He's hired a private detective to find you. No luck so far, but I'm afraid sooner or later he'll find out where you live. I'm not excusing him. After you left, he changed. He's become irritable. Often takes it out on me and the kids. We haven't bought a new house. We live in the old one, even though it's too small for us. Edmund says that when he finds you, he will make you pay back the money from the sale of the house. I don't think he can really do that legally, but I'm afraid he will try. I am not writing this to scare you, but to warn you. Perhaps you should be careful not to publicize your whereabouts. Rory and Yvette sometimes ask about you. I tell them you've decided to start a new life and that's your right. They seem to understand that better than their father. I hope you're doing well. You deserve a peaceful and happy life after all you have been through. Sincerely, Tabitha." I reread the letter several times, feeling the anger building up inside. Edmund hired a private investigator? Is he going to make me pay the money back? After everything he'd said? After trying to kick me out of my own house? I got up and walked around the apartment, trying to calm myself down. From the outside, it might have seemed cruel of me to sell the house without warning and disappear. But hadn't Edmund been cruel when he'd told me to get lost? When he planned to send me to a nursing home to take possession of my house? No, I felt no guilt. I did what I had to do. I had protected myself, my independence, my right to my own life. I went back to the kitchen, took out matches, and put the fire to Tabitha's letter. The paper caught fire and I tossed it into the sink, watching it turn to ash. Then I turned on the water, washing away the last traces. Edmund can look for me all he wants. He can hire 10 private investigators. It won't make any difference. I'm not going back in time, not going to let him control my life again. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean, dark and calm on a November evening. How far I've come from that scared, confused woman who listened to her son plan to send her to a nursing home. How much I've gained in these months: confidence, new friends, new hobbies, a new way of looking at the world. No, I won't let Edmund ruin all that. Not going to let fear take over my life again. I picked up my phone and dialed Pearl's number. We needed to talk. I wasn't mad at her for telling Tabitha my address, but I wanted to make sure no one else knew where I lived. Hello? I heard a familiar voice on the phone. Pearl, I said, I need your help. I told her about Tabitha's letter, about Edmund's plans to find me, about my fears. Don't worry, Pearl reassured me. I only gave Tabitha your address because she seemed genuinely concerned. I don't think she'll tell Edmund. She seems afraid of him herself. Still, I want to be careful, I said. If Edmund or anyone on his behalf asks about me, tell them you don't know where I am. That I could have gone anywhere: Florida, Arizona, California. Of course, Pearl agreed. I won't say a word. But Nancy, do you really think Edmund could hurt you? I hesitated. No, I didn't think my son was capable of physical violence. But emotional? Intimidation? Manipulation? Yes, he was capable of that. I just want to live my life in peace, I said, without the ghosts of the past. I felt better after talking to Pearl. She was a trusted friend, despite the distance between us. She understood me, supported my decision to start a new life. I couldn't sleep that night, thinking about Tabitha's letter, about Edmund's anger, about how quickly things had changed. A year ago, I was just a widowed woman, living in my own house with occasional visits from my son and his family. Now I'm a condo owner in a coastal town with new friends, new hobbies, new plans for the future, and with a son who hired a private investigator to find me. Life is full of irony. I woke up this morning with a firm decision: not to let fear ruin my new life. I will continue to live the way I've lived these months, fully, interestingly, happily. I won't hide or look over my shoulder. If Edmund finds me, well, I will meet him as an equal, not as a frightened old woman. I stepped out onto the balcony with a cup of coffee and looked out at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the shore, receding and coming back again, an eternal, unchanging rhythm. There was a kind of wisdom in it, not to cling to the past, not to be afraid of change, to move forward. And I will move forward no matter what. Because I know now, it's never too late to start a new life. It's never too late to say no to those who disrespect you, even if it's your own children. It's never too late to find new friends, new hobbies, new reasons to wake up in the morning with a smile. I made the right choice, and I haven't